Is there anybody who can find Mojo Jojo somebody to love? Because he's just a poor monkey from a poor family, and his life should be spared from this monstrosity. Welcome back to the Powerpuff Girls vlogs. As I mentioned before, I had plans to start these up again, and I put out requests that you guys request some episodes for me to cover, ranking them from one that you absolutely want me to cover to one that it would be nice if I could cover, but if I get to it, I get to it. If I don't get to it, I don't get to it. You could have asked for any one. You could have asked for a super dark one. You could have asked for maybe one of the later ones where the quality kind of dips down. But instead, you picked a very special episode. All the way from the city of Townsville, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Beat Alls. In this episode of the Powerpuff Girls, Mojo Jojo, him, Fuzzy Lumpkins, and Princess Morbucks all decide to attack the Powerpuff Girls at the same time. And they succeed. They win. And they decide, you know what? We're much better as a team than as individuals. So they form a group called the Beatles. And from there, Beatlemania sweeps the city of Townsville. The villains commit crimes, the girls show up, and they beat them up. They consistently have the hits coming in, people are terrified, and the girls just straight up give up. All's well and good, but then Mojo Jojo meets a lady monkey and falls in love with her, to the point where he leaves the Beatles and decides he wants to be with her. And without Mojo Jojo, the team isn't strong enough to defeat the girls. They overpower them, and then we find out that Mojo Jojo's new girlfriend is in fact a trained monkey from the zoo that the girls set up with him to make him fall in love and destroy the group. Yeah, this episode's pretty light on substance. It's mostly just an excuse to just reference the Beatles through visuals and especially through song titles and lyrics, which are found aplenty in this episode's dialogue. And it's funny because when this episode started, I go into these things blind, so I don't know anything about them. I don't know the premise or anything. I recognize the image of the female monkey, but outside of that, I was completely cold. Again, I figured it was going to be something Beatles related because of the title, but I never would have guessed they would have gone this hard. So when the bad guys defeat the girls, I'm like, okay, where's this going? Are we going to do like a Megamind thing where they just get really bored because there's no challenge anymore? But no, the whole thing is just a Beatles parody. I'm of two minds of this. On one end, it's pretty funny at first. From the narrator having a British accent for the entire episode to the ways they work in all the different song lyrics and titles to some cameos of the Beatles themselves, and even just the way the rise and fall of the villains mirrors the rise and fall of the Beatles. You can clearly tell that the creators generally love the Beatles. Like, this isn't them poking fun at, like, oh, how stupid the Beatles are. They generally love the Beatles, and they generally had a lot of fun doing this episode. But after a while, it gets a little grating. But yeah, I wasn't super crazy about this one, but I can see why people like it. Again, I can see some people finding this episode cute. For me, I just found it a little tedious after a while. But I'm still glad I saw it. I'm still glad that I now understand where that female monkey comes from. I will say this episode did remind me of the Batman episode Almost Got Him, because in that episode the villains are gathered around and they're discussing which one of them came the closest to killing Batman. And in the episode, Killer Croc jumps in and is like, "So this one time, I threw a rock at him." And there's this awkward silence from the villains. And then Killer Croc says, "Well, it was a big one." And they play it off like it's like this really pathetic plan, but in reality, that's what Fuzzy Lumpkins does in this episode, and it's like the finisher, like the cream of the crop, as far as destroying the Powerpuff Girls. So I thought it's funny. It's like what was lame for Killer Croc is actually pretty cool in Powerpuff Girls. I also found it interesting. I was looking on fandom, and apparently, the airing of this episode was funky. It actually aired in the UK before coming to the States, assuming the article's right. You'd think that Powerpuff Girls would air in the States first and then go international, but instead it's the other way around. I'm not sure why that is, but it does make for an interesting parallel with the Beatles, who did start off in Britain and then make their way over to America. To close off this episode, I'm going to recommend some Beatles stuff. If you're a fan of this episode, I highly recommend checking out the film Across the Universe. It's a musical in the vein of Mamma Mia, but instead of using ABBA songs, they use Beatles songs. And the way they integrate the songs into the episode is very clever. Visuals they come up with to accompany the songs are super imaginative. The story's a little flimsy, similar to the show, but there's just so much creativity and imagination how they incorporate all the Beatles songs. And the other thing I'd recommend is the film I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's the first film that Robert Zemeckis did before he was known for Back to the Future and Roger Rabbit. It's about a bunch of teenagers trying to get to a Beatles concert and the various shenanigans they encounter along the way. It's super energetic and chaotic and a ton of fun. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog. Again, I'm sorry I wasn't super crazy about this episode. I'm sure for some of you this is like your favorite episode, but it was still an interesting watch, and I'm curious to see what the other recommendations holds for me. Because again, I'm blind as a bat. I don't know anything about them. I don't know where fans rank them amongst other episodes, and I'm excited to dig into them, so be sure to be on the lookout for those. Until then, this is J Star Wars 360, signing off.